And also, as a lot of these characters, there is the Prime Minister, Itamud-ad-Dawla, and his son, Azaf Khan, the future Prime Minister, and many others. So let's show you a detail of the top scene. There it is. I'm not going to tell you to look at the textiles in every one of the pictures, but they are absolutely amazing, and the jewellery. And so there we have the Shah Jahan, the future Shah Jahan, Prince Khurram, he's called, the Emperor Jahangir, and interestingly, above, we have Akbar. So we have father, son, grandson, the three middle great Mughal emperors. And just to show you what Balchand looked like himself, there he is. That is the artist, and the convention was that if an artist included himself in the picture, he was always carrying a folder which contained his art. So there it is, and in fact, written on his folder, if this pointer is dying, I fear it is dying, it is dead, right? Fortunately, one always carries a spare. And so that Persian writing says, a likeness of Balchand in Persian, in case you can't read it. Anyway, there we are, so that is Balchand. And let us go on to the next picture, which is 2 years later in the city of Mandu, which I pointed out to you. And this picture is by Balchand's brother, a man called Payag, who you will see represented upstairs. In fact, a picture by him is on the front of the catalogue. This picture, and also Payag included himself in the picture. I'm not going to show you a blow-up of him, but he's just there. And there's his folder, you can see just there. And here we have, this is 2 years later, what has happened is that the Emperor Jahangir has sent his favourite son, Prince Khurram, into battle against the rebels in central India. He has succeeded, and the Emperor Jahangir is so pleased with his third son that he gives him the title Shah Jahan, King of the World. The Mughals weren't sort of modest people. They gave themselves titles like King of the... Anyway, so that we can now call Shah Jahan Shah Jahan. And here he is, so that is Shah Jahan, and that is his father, Jahangir. And I'd like just to mention one, Payag, who did this painting. This was the palace in Mandu. Do you remember I said that Akbar was very liberal with Christianity, for instance? On the wall here, there is Jesus, and there is the Virgin Mary. That's just to show you how liberal Akbar was. And there, of course, as usual, is the Prime Minister, Itamud-ad-Dawla, his son, Azaf Khan. Anyway, let us now look at the detail of the emperor's chest, just there, and this item here, which is a turban ornament. Now, there we have it. I'm going to talk about, first of all, this turban ornament. Now, that was very important because, I don't know if you can see in the middle of it, is a colossal ruby. In fact, I have to be careful for the gemologists present. It's actually called a spinel, but it's a sort of ruby. That was a very iconic gem in the Mughal Empire because it had been given to Akbar. It goes way back, and it was a symbol of the empire. And so on this occasion, the emperor is giving it to his son, together with the title Shah Jahan. After that, I'm going to be talking about this miniature painting here, which I think you might be surprised to learn that the person depicted in that miniature painting on the Mughal emperor's chest is King James I of England. I'll come back to that in a minute, but that takes a bit of explaining. But first of all, let's look at this is the ruby, or the spinel that still exists, and you can see it, I think, any time you like, if you happen to be passing through Kuwait. Is that right, Milo, I think? Yes. It's in the Al Saba collection in Kuwait, and there is the ruby, or the spinel. But let's go now on to the miniature painting. This is an exact copy, no, not an exact copy, this is a very similar miniature painting to the one that was on the emperor's chest. You're actually looking at a miniature. By the miniature, is about 3.5 inches high, and this was done by a man called Peter Oliver. Now, the one on the emperor's chest was by Peter Oliver's father, a man called Isaac Oliver, and it was a picture of King James I. And the explanation is that in 1616, the first British ambassador was appointed to the Mughal court. He was a man called Sir Thomas Roe. And Sir Thomas Roe, very wisely, brought with him from England a few presents for the Emperor Jahangir, including this miniature painting of King James I. And we already have, we still have, Sir Thomas Roe's diary. And Sir Thomas Roe tells us exactly what happened. And I'm paraphrasing. He said that the Prime Minister, Itamud ad-Dawla, summoned me to give my little picture to the Emperor. But he obviously knew that he had this gift, and the diary says the emperor took extreme content and showed it to everybody in the court, and finally he summoned his chief painter and said to him, "What do you think of this?" And the chief painter, and Sir Thomas Roe in his diary said, the fool answered. In other words, Sir Thomas Roe thought that the chief painter was a fool. The fool answered that he could do as well. At which the emperor said to the ambassador, "My man says he can do as well. What do you think of that?" And the ambassador replied, "I know that he cannot." Now, here is a bit of a challenge. This is one of the best British portrait miniature painters versus the chief Mughal miniature painter. Anyway, what happened was, in brief, was that the emperor, the ambassador left. Unbeknownst to the ambassador, the emperor asked his chief painter to make 5 exact copies of this picture. About 2 or 3 weeks later, he summoned back the ambassador, and on a board there were 6 pictures. One of them was his, all with the same frames or without frames, and he said, "Choose yours." So this was a challenge, and in his diary, Sir Thomas Roe says that much to his surprise, it was very difficult for him to choose his own. But he said in the end he did, which was by art apparent. Anyway, it was just this lovely competition between Mughal miniature painting and Western miniature painting. Now, we're going to go now quickly to the death of the Prime Minister, Itamud ad-Dawla, over here. Now, when a Prime Minister died in the Mughal Empire, instability often broke out. And in this case, Jahangir's third son, our hero Shah Jahan, went into rebellion against his father, tried to overthrow him, because by that time Jahangir was a junkie, I'm afraid. He took so much opium and alcohol every day that he was really out of the picture. And the empire was by that time being ruled by his then favourite wife, Nur Jahan, who was the daughter of the former Prime Minister. And I think I've got a picture of... Yes, that is Nur Jahan, so she was in effect the empress, but Shah Jahan tried to overthrow his father. He failed. I'm just going back. Just going back. Do you remember I said how ruthless the Mughals were? What do you think Shah Jahan did with his 2 older brothers? He killed them, exactly. At least he killed one of them. Khusrau he killed. There is Khusrau, he killed him. Parvis he didn't have to kill because he was also a junkie. He was just totally out of it, and he drank himself to death a couple of years later. And indeed, in 1627, Jahangir himself drank himself to death in Kashmir. So Shah Jahan took over as emperor. And here is his coronation. This painting is by an artist called Bichitter. And Milo Beach, in the catalogue of the exhibition of the Padshah-Nama, does say that this is possibly one of the finest paintings in the entire book. And it is a magnificent picture. Milo can identify 42 people in this picture. That gives you an idea of the detail. I won't identify all of them, but what I would do is always, this is in the fort at Agra. There is the new emperor. There is his 4 sons, 1, 2, 3, and 4 sons, we'll always see them, and there is his Prime Minister, Azaf Khan, who is an extremely important character for him. I'd just briefly like to say how important the Prime Minister's family was around the throne, and all of them are grouped in this area just here. And this is something that gave for the stability of the empire. I just give you this little plan. You don't have to remember all the names. There is the Prime Minister Azaf Khan. We can identify his brother, another brother, a brother-in-law, Sadiq Khan, another thug. All those 3 had sons, 1, 2, 3. So those were all nephews of the Prime Minister, but just to be on the safe side, they were all married to the Prime Minister's daughters. 1, 2, 3 daughters. So these three were very solidly related to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister also had a daughter, Mumtaz Mahal, of course, married to Shah Jahan, his favourite wife. And he also had a son, Shaista Khan, but if you could perhaps just remember one or two of them, Jafar Khan, there's a good story about him, and also Shaista Khan, we'll see a lot of him. So let's go on. That is, for instance, Jafar Khan, which we'll see a lot of him. That's Shaista Khan, the Prime Minister's son. We'll see a lot of this man, Afzal Khan, the Finance Minister, but that just gives you can identify all of these people. Now, the first crisis in the Mughal empire of Shah Jahan happened in central India, here in what we call the Deccan, just here. And so the entire court moved its headquarters to a place called Burhanpur, which is just there. And so the first picture I'm going to show you is in Burhanpur. The second is a battle in the city of Kandahar, just there, not to be confused with that Kandahar, which you're more familiar with in Afghanistan, what's now Afghanistan. And then the third picture I'm going to show you, I'm afraid I do have a health warning here. If you're of nervous disposition, we have a very brutal and bloody picture coming up. I'll warn you just before I show it, but it is very nasty. But it's primarily to warn others not to rebel against the emperor. Because what happened was the former governor of the Deccan had not accepted Shah Jahan as the legitimate new emperor. So in a city called Kalinjar, just here, eventually this rebel, a man called Khan Jahan Lodi, was caught and beheaded. So that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to show you that scene. But anyway, in the meantime, here is the court in Burhanpur, and here we have all the usual suspects, the emperor and his 4 sons, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we always have the Prime Minister Azaf Khan, we always have the Finance Minister Afzal Khan, but the person I'd like you to look at is Muhammad Ali Beg, this gentleman here, and I'm going to show you what he looks like. Now, Muhammad Ali Beg was the Persian ambassador. Now, the importance of that was that in those days there were 3 Muslim empires. There were the Ottoman Turks, there were the Persians, and there were the Mughals. And of those 3, the Mughals were the most junior because they had been in existence the least time. And therefore it was very important for the Mughals to show that the Mughal emperors had the respect of the Persian emperor, the Persian empire. And so this shows the Persian ambassador paying his respects, indeed saluting to the Mughal emperor Shah Jahan. And he also took the precaution of bringing a lot of presents, which are down here. So that's the Persian emperor. So let's go on now. This is the Battle of Kandahar. So here we have the imperial troops led here by Naziri Khan, and what we have, this is by the artist called Payag. Now, do you remember I said that Akbar had let copies of Western art to come into India? The influence of Western art can be seen in this picture. I'm just going to mention one difference between Persian art, from which Mughal painting primarily derived, and Western art, and that is, you know what I mean by perspective. In short, things in the foreground are big and things in the background are small. Well, by this time, Payag has learnt to paint these objects in the distance, small, that building, and there are some horses and elephants which are smaller. But in the, and what is happening here, by the way, is that they have let off a bomb underneath the wall of the city of Kandahar to try to get in. But one of my favourite details from this picture by Payag is a bloody battle is going on, but in the foreground, I hope you might be able to see, there are 2 characters that are totally unconcerned with this battle. Have you seen them yet? Yes, you can see them. They're 2 rabbits. One is there, and one is there. And I can't resist actually showing it to you. There they are. And the one on the right is, I describe as a narcissistic rabbit. Do you understand why? Yes? Because he is undoubtedly looking at his own reflection in the pond. There's his head, there are the 2 ears. There are his 2 ears reflected in the pond.